Warning: all views expressed in this video are from the creator and do not represent the opinions of any other company or individual. Content shown within is intended for entertainment purposes only, and no infringement is intended. Enjoy!
Hey everybody, it's Perch, and let's talk about kind of this will be kind of a more rambly than usual. Sorry, spoiler. I'm gonna just kind of ramble a bit. I want to talk about the future of comics, and in particular, the future of how comics get to readers. And there's probably a lot of topics, and one of the things I've got to do, unless people tell me otherwise, I'll need to have these be less stream of consciousness, just me blabbing away, and actually some more facts and some more details. And there will be some of those, we'll put those up. Those take longer to produce because I got to come with data. I've got to come with some facts. It's hard for me to do, especially since I'm only making like $200-300 an hour in ad revenue. And I mean, what do you expect? What do you expect out of me? I'm not CNN. Anyway, so future of comics. So we're kind of in an unnatural state. And what I mean by that is, well, this depends on your point of view. I think that some time ago, a decade ago, maybe, 10, 15 years ago, a number of things happened with technology and comic books in Japan, where you had very early feature phones. This is pre-iPhone, pre-smartphone, so very small screens. And you had a population that got access to comics on that phone, and that was okay. They started reading in that format, and it sucked. And here in the U.S., or wherever you are in the world, I shouldn't say here in the U.S., but in the U.S., there were early adopters. There were, tech, they call it kind of the early adopter, the start of the curve, where people took, really terrible readers, kind of the very first tablets, or, Nook, they're just very ugly kind of readers, pre-iPad even, like giant PDAs. And they would slam comics on there. They would put PDFs because most supported that, and it was pinch zoom kind of reading experience, and it wasn't a good experience to read comics, and it was very, very time consuming to put them on. And most people were pirating because they were not going through the trouble of scanning, and those scans were bad, and none of it was good in the U.S. And the experience kind of never got beyond the early adopters. And there's a bunch of reasons for that. It has nothing to do with comics. It's, the devices were kludgy and techy and expensive in a lot of cases. They were really, devices in the U.S. were marketed toward people who are a little bit more wealthy or very wrapped up in business. So you had kind of the BlackBerry users or the people who had those kinds of devices. That was who the technology was aimed at. And, big shock, that audience wasn't necessarily your comic book audience. And so the two never really got moving. So you had simultaneously in Japan, now these devices, these tech devices really got absorbed and taken by geek culture people in Japan who naturally saw the value in wanting to see comics. And also, and another just kind of very basic thing, a lot of travel and transit in Japan's happening on a train. So you're getting on a train, you're not driving, you are sitting and you're consuming. And in the U.S., you do not have that kind of train system. You don't have that kind of bus system. Most people are, single driver car people. And so you had kind of two parallel lifestyles kind of go, and you had comics flourish in one digitally and not work well in the other. And that is, normal to the culture. But what it also created was this strange kind of stunted growth. Because if you were in comics 10 years ago or a little further back, and you would go to the comic conventions, typically there were people on the Marvel side, people on the DC side, people all over the place, and certainly Dark Horse and other places. And they were there for digital. They were there to kind of seed this market. And a lot of them made the mistake of looking at what was going on in Japan and saying, it's going to happen here. It's just a matter of time for it to happen here in the US. But for kind of the reasons I mentioned before, it wasn't going to happen in the same way in the US. The growth was going to be different. There's just no question about that. The technology aimed a different place. The price point was off. It was a very different world. So the tactics of saying we'll just replicate what's going on in Japan won't work. They just would not work here in the U.S. So that was kind of a, a kind of a sad battle. You'd see, and all around, retailers are getting freaked out because they're going, crap, digital's coming. It's a new flashy thing. And Marvel started playing around with the AR add to comics, and they're clearly courting kind of this digital world, and we'll be forgotten, and comic stores will be erased, and everybody will be just reading digitally, and nobody will want to read print anymore, and we're screwed. Well, that obviously hasn't happened. I mean, comic shops are screwed for different reasons, but digital's not one of them. And every now and then you see somebody who kind of continues to carry that torch of, digital's just around the corner. We're going to be just like Japan in a year or two, and it's not going to happen. That's not to say digital, and that's why I said the purpose is kind of rambly talk is about the future of comics. So the future of comics are, undoubtedly digital is going to play a role. There's no doubt. It's too convenient for the early adopters who, went in and bought an iPad and downloaded a lot of comics to their device. It is cool. You can pick up your library walks with you anywhere you go, and you can instantly have access to it. And you can crop panels, and you can put it in podcasts, and you can do that all day long. But it still needs to get through the early adopter period into the mass market. And that's going to require either a price point shift. It's going to have to get a lot cheaper so people can consume it. It's going to have to get a lot easier, meaning you don't have to be technical to get the comics on the device and go through that process. And it still is a little techy right now. And you're going to have some original content that is truly content that will force people to seek out the platform. And here is another area where in Japan, you started to have content that was written for digital by creators people really cared about, that were noteworthy and would boost the platform. So you kind of took choice away from the consumers where they had to go digital or they weren't going to get content from these creators. And in the US, and at least the two major publishers, there's been certainly digital content that's come out, but nothing that has moved people to digital. Even titles like Injustice and other things where there was a stronger digital push, you still had printed copies, so you still were able to consume it in the shop, and so it didn't move people. And it's going to take. I mean, what would it take today? It'd probably take a price cut to get, ease the entry in. It might take an all you can eat model where you can like sign up for a Netflix like library. And I think, by the way, if it ever becomes compelling, I think that's an ace that Disney knows it has up its sleeve. So if you have Disney Plus, you have their streaming service. Um, I think there's been some interesting developments. You have Apple, who are about to announce, probably by the time you're listening to this, have announced an entertainment platform, a streaming platform. Part of that is news in a kind of more compelling way that will be both print and video. And so I think Disney at some point looks at this and says, we have this massive library, and how do we make the Netflix of comics? And we put our library out there, not just comics, but all the Disney material and everything else. I think that's something that happens right now. There's just not a compelling business case to make it worthwhile to really invest in, but it is happening. It's coming. So I think these are the factors around what's causing this market to kind of be held back. And we've still got a long way to go. I think Unfortunately, if you look at what's happening in the market, tablets are still pretty expensive. People are still not driven to go to those places for content. And this is by the way a dialogue that Apple and Google and Samsung and LG and all these device makers are having on a constant basis, which is how do we make the tablet something that every single person has to have? That it's not just a techie person, it's not just an artist, it's not just a company member. It's like you need that tablet, and sales of tablets have plateaued. They're not. It's not growing again. So how do you get them growing again? And there's a little bit of a dysfunction there too, because these companies, certainly Apple at least, and Microsoft with PC and makers of PCs, there's a debate. Are we going all in on tablet, or are we going all in laptops? Well, from a business perspective, it'd be really great if people would just buy both. And as long as that kind of moment is happening, we're at a standstill. So, it's the future of comics. I think it's probably a more interesting discussion to say on the indie side, on the what people call the web comic side. Is there a vehicle where new creators, independent creators, can come up with things and have a very easy, very indexable system where people can throw their content in and almost kind of make the deviant art of comics, that is mainstream. That is not a niche. It's not a handful of creators or a handful or a movement. It's actually a more mainstream digital library and vending system for comics. And I think based on where we are, I think it's got to be, again, this kind of all you can eat subscription model. Somebody's got to lift up the mantle of saying, I'm going to create storage, I'm going to create the billing mechanism, I'm going to create a monthly subscription, and then I'm going to find ways that I can detect through analytics, when certain comics are being read or consumed, and I'm going to give then a royalty back to the maker, because there's not enough money for anyone to start buying up content and like Netflix does in order to feed their service. They're going to have to figure out some revenue share model with the creators, and I think that's something that probably needs to happen. I think that's the best way to get some more attention into comics and really push that model. But it's hard, and there's some technical complexities there, and it's where's the money? If you're in tech and you know how to make these kinds of systems, would you spend that building a comic vending system, or would you tackle one of the 800 other things that are probably going to make you a lot more money? Which means it almost has to be a passion project where somebody's going to go in and they're going to make this kind of system because they love comics or they love the whole concept and they want to push it. Because if you're going out to get kind of venture capital money, or you're going out to try and make a business, nobody is going to give you money, or nobody's going to give you millions of dollars to go build this. Not Just not going to happen right now. So that's going to be a trick. Another route, though, might be that another country, like a Japan, um, understands that this is how to evolve their business. So they're going to create that and showing, or some of these other companies are experimenting this place. So maybe a platform gets built there that then gets carried over to the US, and they partner up with, somebody like an Amazon or a Verizon or somebody who wants to kind of inject some digital content that is comic related into an overall offering of media. I think that's a way it can go. So anyway, I'll probably go ahead and cap it there. Still a lot of speculation. This is just me kind of talking, thinking out loud, trying to explain a little bit where I think the world's going, where the industry's going, and why it's hard. It is absolutely hard right now to push this ball forward. And so these are some of the factors that are getting in the way. Thanks for listening. Look, if you like what you hear, subscribe. That's cool. I don't know what that gets me. I hear if I get to a certain number, then I get a balloon. So I'd like a balloon. So please subscribe and tell your friends. If you want to be notified when new videos come out, you can tap on notification. You'll be told that you're there. I'm not on this channel saying a bunch of super antagonistic things or hopefully controversial things. So Hopefully this doesn't happen to me, but from what I understand, YouTube occasionally flushes subscribers. So if you found you were subscribed and you're not anymore, then hey, maybe that's what happened. I don't know. I who knows what's going on. And then I'm on Twitter. You can follow me over there. Just look for Perch, and you can subscribe, and you can ask me questions, and I'll answer them. And I'll do videos based on the things you're interested in, and that would be cool. So tell a friend. Your goal today is to tell a friend, or if you have no friends, tell an enemy. And that's what I want you to go out and do. So thanks a lot.